says you have to show respect for the elderly.
Yeah, so please.
Fragile. Must be Italian.
All right.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Temple Beth Sholom, Las Vegas, Nevada. We're so happy to celebrate Shabbat with you this morning. Word on the street, we have a bar mitzvah. It's going to be fantastic. We're excited to celebrate with the Mendel family. If you're able to do so, please rise. We're going to begin our service on page 103. Blessings for a new day. Birchot HaShachar.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasek vivina havkim ben yom uben layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani betzamo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani ben chorim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish harumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Matir Asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rakah haaretz hamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechem et tzedek haver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasali kor tzorki.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten layaf koah.
Please be seated.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam amonei rishanam. Utenenu hayom uv'kol yom lachein ulhesed rachamim be'einecha uvenei koroenu v'tzimul hasadim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael. Le'olam yadam yireh shamayim ribon kol ha'olam Ha'ashreinu matav chelkeinu u'manayim goraleinu afa Yerushateinu. Ha'ashreinu she'anachnu mashkimim u'marivim erev ha'voker ve'omrim pa'amayim b'kol yom Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Atahu ad Shalom nevar ha'olam Atahu ha'olam Atahu hazeh
Atahu ba'olam hazeh Atahu le'olam.
Kadesh et shimcha v'kadeshe shemecha v'kadesh et shimcha lomecha uvishuatcha tanim v'agpiagreneinu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh et shimcha barabim.
Beginning on page 107, we have an opportunity to study a passage of Torah together, and afterwards we'll say Kaddish de Rabbanan.
Yehi ratzon melefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu shebanei beit hamikdash b'mehera b'yameinu v'tein chalkeinu b'toratecha v'sham na'avodcha be'ir akim ha'olam ukshanim kadmoniyot.
Kaddish de Rabbanan for mourners and those observing a yortzeit can be found on page 111.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'alma divra kirutei ve'amlik malchutei v'chayechon u'vyamechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv ve'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarak v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'it hadar, v'it ale, v'it halal, shemei dekudesha b'richu. Ve'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran ve'elma ve'imru amen. Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanan, ve'al Talmidechon, ve'al kol Talmidechon, ve'al kol man da'askim be'oraita, divi atra hadain v'di be'kol atar v'atar, yehei lechon uchon shlama rabba, hina v'chizda v'rachamin, v'chayin arichin, unzona revicha, unforkana mikodam avuhon devishmaya ve'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim tovim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Osei shalom imromav, hu barachamav ya'asei shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Hayom Shabbat Kodesh Shabbat Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat Tov Lehodron Lana Elo Zamer Shabbat Yon Hagi Baboker Azdech Chavim Notes Kabal Leilot Ish Be'arim Tzadik Katzamor Hojinim b'seiva d'shenim nananim you lehagid ki ashar Adonai suriva lo avlatabo.
We continue, page 120.
Mizmor ashir hanukat habayit l'David aromim chadonai kilatani v'lashon zamanu l'nakatzi daminu kodshoki ragabah Adonai b'ratzon pam. Haftarah mispirim l'choli patakta sakividas reni simcha lemani zuvavalo yidom Adonai Elohai le'olam odecha.
The Mourner's Kaddish for mourners and those observing a yortzeit, page 121.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'alma divra kirute ve'amlik malchute v'chayechon u'vyemechon u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael Ba'agala uvizman kari ve'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevarak le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarak ve'yishtabak ve'yitpa'ar ve'yitramam ve'yitnaseh. Ve'yithadar ve'yitale ve'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'richu. Ve'ela min kol berchata ve'shirata. Tushbechata ve'nechamata da'amiran ve'alma ve'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Osei shalom imromav, hu yasei shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen.
Please rise, we continue together, page 122.
Baruch she'amar ve'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu, Baruch osei bereshit, Baruch ve'osei, Baruch
Kamala Aras, Himala for you.
Yachid ke ha'olamim melech shabakam v'riyad shemo hagadol Baruch ata Adonai melech mehulal betishbacho.
Please be seated, 123.
Hodu la'Adonai kiru mishmor Zikru niflo tabel Zira Yisrael avdo benach Yaakov v'yirav hu Adonai Eloheinu b'chol ha'as mikutav Zikru le'olam v'ritov Lo haniach le'ishma Ki klo ha'amim elim v'Adonai shamayim asa Hod v'ara lefanav Yismechu hashamayim v'tagil ha'aretz Kitov Kilam has Toby Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtakavu lahar kodsho Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu v'hurachum yakaber v'lo yashkit v'hir balashi v'boker amato Atz Adonai lo tichlach v'mekam emini Azdech Adonai Tziva'ot Asher Moteach Bach Adonai Hoshia Melech Yanenu Veyom Koreinu Hoshia et Amecha Uvarek et Nachalatecha Mure 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 Venasem Ad HaOlam Hoshia et Amecha Uvarek et Nachalatecha Mure 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 Venasem Ad HaOlam Nafshenu Hitala Adonai Ezrihu Yivahu Zalivenu Ki V'Shem Kod Shabbat Taknu Yehi Hazdaka Va'ani B'Chazdaka B'Taktihya Gili V'Shuatecha Ashira LaAdonai Ki Gamal Alai.
If you're able to do so, please rise. We continue together, page 132.
Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chazdo. Hodu le'Elohei ha'Elohim, ki le'olam hazdo. Hodu l'Adonai ha'Adonim, ki le'olam hazdo. Le'osei orim gedolim, ki le'olam chazdo. Et Hashemesh l'mem shelet bayom, ki le'olam hazdo. Et hayareach v'kokavim l'mem shelo balayla. Le'molich hamo b'midbar, ki le'olam chazdo. Le'makei melachim gedolim, ki le'olam hazdo. V'yaharog melachim adinim, ki le'olam hazdo. V'natan artzan l'chala, ki le'olam chazdo. Nachala le'Yisrael abdo, ki le'olam hazdo. Nai 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 ki le'olam hazdo. Noten lechem lechol b'asar ki le'olam hazdo. Hodu le'el hashamayim ki le'olam hazdo. Nai 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 ki le'olam hazdo.
Please be seated. 136.
Ashrei yoshvei beitecha od yalenu chasela. Hashem shekakalo Hashem shadonai Elohav tehila l'David. Haromim cha Elohai HaMelech. Uzecher avtu chayabi v'tikvan. Poteach et yetecha v'tzimur tzadika ramos. Tehilat Adonai Reberpi Vivarek Abosar Shem Kod Sholei Olam Va'ed Va'anaknu Nevarech Ya Me'ata Ve'ad Olam Hallelujah.
141.
Hallelujah, 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 El Bekodsho, hallelujah, Bekirahuzo, hallelujah, Bigvurotab, hallelujah, Kirov Gudo, hallelujah, 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 B'teka Shofar, hallelujah, Nevel V'Kinor, hallelujah, B'tov U'Machol, hallelujah, Menim Ve'Yugab, hallelujah, 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 B'tziltzalei Shama, hallelujah, B'tziltzalei Truah, hallelujah, B'tziltzalei Shama, hallelujah, B'tziltzalei Truah, hallelujah, 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 Kol Shema Tehalelia, hallelujah, Kol Shema Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Please rise.
Hallelujah. 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 Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'Amen. Baruch Adonai Tzidken Yerushalayim, Hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Elohim Elohei Yisrael, Osei Niflaot Levado. Ubaruch Shem Kavod Le'olam, V'malei Kavado et Kol Haaretz, Amen ve'Amen. Vayavarech David Adonai Baruch atah Adonai Elohei Yisrael Avinu me'olam ve'ad olam lecha Adonai hagedulai. Hatahu namedek Hatahu Adonai ha'Elohim asher bachartam Avram ve'otetu merakazdim v'tadeh shemo Abraham umatzat adavavon eman lefanecha v'charos V'hayam kata lifneihem v'yabaru b'togav yabasha v'et word fehem yishakta bim solot k'mo even b'mayim azim v'yosha Adonai bayom hahu et Yisrael b'mitzrayim v'yar Yisrael b'mitzrayim lo zefar hayam v'yar Yisrael la'ashir asa Adonai b'mitzrayim v'yiram et Adonai v'yaminu v'Adonai uv'Moshe avdo Az Yasher Moshe uvanei Yisrael et hashira zol Adonai ve'imru le'emor Hashira l'Adonai ki gaoga sus v'rokvo rama vayam ozi ve'zimraya vayehi li lishua ozi Zimraya Vayehi Lishua Ozi Zimraya Vayehi Lishua Ozi Zimraya Vayehi Lishua Ze'eli Yamin Haranu Mekoach Min
One 44.
Adonai imlok le'olam va'ed Adonai imlok le'olam va'ed V'tikak Miriam
Haneviyah.
Ki la'Adonai hamluk ha'mashab goyim v'halamoshim patronish poresa v'haytal Adonai hamlucha v'haya Adonai lemelech kol ha'aretz Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
Please be seated. 145.
Nai 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 yai nai 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 ya nai 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 yai nai 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 ya nai 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 yai nai 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 ya nai 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 nishmat kol chai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu barak basar Mimi Stramgo Tanonai Eloheinu
Page 147.
Ha'ebrat moruzek ha'gromik fot shemecha Gibor netzach b'hanura b'norotecha Ha'melech ha'yoshev al kisei ram v'nisa Shochen ad marom v'kadosh shemo
Shochena v'marom v'kadosh shemo
וכתוב רננו צדיקים באדוני לישרים נאווה תהילה בפי ישרים תתהלל ובדברי צדיקים תתברך ובלשון חסידים תתרומם ובקרב קדושים תתקדש ובמחלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל ברינה יתפאר שמך מלכנו בכל דור ודור שכן כל בת כל היצורים לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו להודות להלל לשבח לפעל לרומם להדל לברך להלל ולקלס על כל דברי שירו ותשבחות דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו האל המלך אדוני
כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו שיר שבח הלל וזמרה
ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני אל מלך גדול ותשבחות אל ההודאות אדון הנפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אל חיי העולמים.
Let us please rise for Chatzi Kaddish, page 148.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ועלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי כל ימי כל וחיי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר וירומם וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקדושה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
Please be seated.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם יזרעו שחוסה שלום ורד הכל הכל ידעו
We're on page 150.
הכל ואל ותח בכל יום דלתות וכתובו מקדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית המלך הן כרכך ואין זרועתך אפס פתך ומדומה לך הן כרכך אדוני אלוהינו בעולם הזה ואין זרועתך מלכנו לחיי העולם הבא אפס פתך גאלנו לימות המשיח ואין עוד מושיענו לתחיית המתים אל אדון הכל המעשים ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה גודלו וטובו מלא עולם דעת ותבונה סובבים אותו המתקיים חיות הקודש ונראה בכבוד על מרכבה זכות ומישור לפני כיסו כסף ורחמים לפני כבודו טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת בבינה ובהשכל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה נאה זיוום בכל העולם שמחים וצאתם, בששים בבואם, עושים באימה רצון קונם. פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמות סולה ורינה לזכר מלכותו. קרא לשמש ויזרח אורה והתקין צורת הלבנה. שבח נותנים לו כל צבא מרום תפארת וגדולה. שרפים ואופנים בחיות הקודש. לאל אשר שבע מעשים ביום השביעי.
זה שבע של יום השביעי. שבע שבת. שבת קודש שמך אדוני אלוהינו יתקדש וזכרך מלכנו.
תתבורק מושיענו שבק מעשה ידיך ואמר שעשית יפרוך הסלע. תתבורק צורנו מלכנו וגואלנו בורא קדושים. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו כולם אהובים, כולם מרורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים בהם רצון קונם, וכולם פותחים אפם עכשיו תורה, בשירה וזמרה וברכים ומשבחים, ופארים ומעריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שם האל המלך הגדול, הגיבור והנורא הקדוש הוא. וכולם מקבלים עליכם ומלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש את מנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה מן הקדושה. כולם כקרונים ואומרים ביראה, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. ואופנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מנסים לעומת שרפים, לעומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, לאל ברוך נעמוד איתנו למלך. המחדש בטבו בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית, כאמור לעושרים גדולים, כי לעולם חזור. אור חדש על ציון טהר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות. אהבה רבה אהבתנו, אדוני אלוהינו, חמלה גדולה ויצרה עמלת עלינו. אבינו מלכנו בעבור אבותינו, שבטחו בך אבינו מלכנו. ותלמדם חוקי חיים, כן תכוננו למדנו, אבינו אב הרחמן, המרחם רחם עלינו. ותן בליבנו להבין ולהשכיל לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות, ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו. נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות קוממיות לארצנו. כי אל פועל ישועות אתה, ובנו וקראת בכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת. להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוקר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד.
ואהבת אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ומאודיך
והדברים האלה שלא נמצא בפנינו.
וקשרתם לעודייך. ואם שמוע אתה אשר
ואם שמוע תשמעו על מזותי שלא נמצא. ושמתם את דברי אלה לב אביכם. ויאמר אדוני משה לאמור לבני ישראל. תזכרו את זה.
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת
ויציב ונכון וקיים ישר ונאמן ובחביב ונחמד ונעים ונורא ואדיר מתוקן. Page 157.
לדור ועד דור הוא קיים ושמו קיים וכיסו נכון מלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיים מדרב חיים קיים לעד.
וברב חיים וקיימים נאמנים נחמדים לעד ולעולמי עולמים. על אבותינו ועלינו ועל בנינו ועל דורותינו.
אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יותרנו ישועתנו ברינו הצילנו מעולם שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך.
עזרת אבותינו אתה ומעולם, מגן מושיע לבניהם אחריהם בכל דור ודור.
ממצרים גאלתנו אדוני אלוהינו עזה שבקרבנו. תהילות תלדיון ברוך ומבורך משה ומרים ובני ישראל לקנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נהדר בקודש נורא תהילות עושה פלא שירה חדשה שירו גאולים לשמך שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Let us please rise.
צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ובדי קדומך יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Amen. We continue praying the Amidah for Shabbat morning beginning on page 159.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Koneh HaKol V'Zocher Chazdei Avot U'Mevi Goel Livnei V'Nechem Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava Melech Ozer Ufoker Moshiach Umagen. Baruch atah Adonai,
ברשמו.
Magen Avraham Ufoken Sarah.
אמן.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה,
רב להושיע.
מכלכל חיים בחסד,
מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים.
סומק נופלים ורופא חולים,
ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר.
מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך שמו.
מחיי המתים.
אמן. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו שמרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר.
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלך כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול אדיר וחזק ומכל.
אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מנסים לעומת שרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו,
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומו עד כן תופיע.
ממקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון? בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראינה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך, על ידי דוד משיח צדקך.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה.
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושיבחך אלוהינו מפינו לעולם ועד, כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך שמו.
האל הקדוש.
אמן.
ישמח משה.
עמדו לפניו על הסיני, שנינו כלבנים, ויקנתו את תורתך, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת. כי לישראל הטוב כי לא לעולם. ברוך אתה you finish praying the Amidah, you may be seated. We continue with Kaddish Shalem, page 167. Amen.
Amen. Yehesh me Rabba mevarach le'alam olam me'almayai. Yitbarak v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yidmavina sevit hadar v'yidalevi talav shemeni kedusha. B'rechu le'ila min kol brakatza v'shirata tush b'katza v'nechemata dami ramel ma'avimru. Amen. Titkabot tzlot tehon v'utahon l'kol Yisrael kol dama v'non v'shemaya v'imru. Amen. Yehesh lama Rabba mishemaya v'chayim alani ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Osei shalom
Bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu.
Ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru ve'imru. Amen.
At this time, I'd like to call upon Ed and Abby to please come up to the bima to present Jacob with his talit. Amen. Let us please rise to join Jacob's family in the Shechayanu.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechiyanu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechiyanu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
We're going to continue with the Torah service on page 168. Let us please remain standing.
Ein kamocha va'elohim Adonai ve'ein kema'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha bechodor vador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed Adonai os le'amo yitain Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom Avarachamim heitiv v'bertzoncha et Zion tivnei homot Yerushalayim tivnei homot Yerushalayim ki vecha levad vatachnu melech el ram v'nisa adon olamim. Vayhi binsoa ha'aron vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai ve'afutzu oivecha ve'anusu mesanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah ulevar
natan Torah, Torah, le'amo Israel, b'kedushato.
Baruch Shemei Demarei Alma. Be anaraches, velish me kadisha, kadisha yakira, ana emar tushbechan, yehi ra'ava kodama, detiv talibi beoraita, vetashli mishalim delibi. Veliba dechol amach Yisrael letavu hayin velishlam.
Amen.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
God Adonai iti, unrome Hashem bo yachdav. Lecha Adonai hagedula, v'hagivura v'hatiferet, v'hanetzach v'yavod. Ki ko b'shamayim u'va'aretz, ki ko b'shamayim u'va'aretz. Lecha Adonai הממלכה והעמית נעשה לכל לראש. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו לאדום רגליו קדוש הוא. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש Adonai Eloheinu, romemu,
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 Adonai Eloheinu, ve'ishtachavu, ve'ishtachavu, la'adam raglav kadoshu, romemu, romemu, Adonai Eloheinu, ve'ishtachavu, ve'ishtachavu, Lehar Kodsho, Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu.
Havarach Hamirachem Osim Biskor B'Teitani B'Yatzil Nafshotenu Min HaSha'ot HaRa'ot B'igar B'Yetzer Hara Min HaNesuim B'Yachon Otanu Lefleitat Olamim B'Imma Lemishalotenu B'Midat Tova Yeshua V'Rachamim. Please be seated. Let us please be seated. Jacob has worked really hard in preparing these words of Torah for his bar mitzvah. So I'm going to ask us to please pay close attention to his words.
Shabbat Shalom. This Shabbat we read Parshat Kedoshim, My Torah portion is about holiness, and how holiness is a thing that should always be felt in the midst of the community. Parshat Kedoshim also offers many different ways through which we can achieve holiness. Specifically, there is a holiness code you need to follow in order to be holy, and other specific requirements, such as not stealing, not murdering, no hating others. For example, things that are not so obvious, like not placing a stumbling block in front of a blind person. God instructs the children of Israel, and of course us, through the Torah, to love others like we love ourselves. It is possible to love others as you love yourself, but probably in a different way than people normally think. When God commands you to love others as you love yourself, he means that you should love and respect their feelings, opinions, and features as you do to yourself. After all, everyone was created in the image of God, therefore we should respect others. So what does it mean to be holy? If you are holy, it means you have followed the holiness code and the requirements to become holy. God commands that in order to be holy, you have to honor your parents, observe the Shabbat and festivals, refrain from worshiping idols, offer sacrifices that are acceptable, and leave quarters of the field and parts of the vineyard for the poor. Once you have done these, you are then holy. Of course, this never ends. You have to keep trying to achieve holiness throughout your whole life. Maimonides, who is a rabbi that lived in Spain in the Middle Ages, says that loving others as you love yourself means that you should love your neighbor with all the qualities and modes of love with which you love yourself. He also believes that it is difficult to love and have concern for others just as much as you have for yourself, but he also says that the Torah does not specifically say how much you have to love others. It basically says it doesn't matter the extent of love, it just matters how genuine it is. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Our Torah reading this morning is the portion of Kedoshim, which begins on the top of page 696. V'yazor v'yagein v'yoshir l'chol achosim bo v'nomar amen. Hakol havu godol Eloheinu adnu kavod la Torah ya'amod. Yechiel Meyer ben Zev Aryeh Rishon. Baruch Shanatan Torah li'amo Yisrael b'kedushato v'yatem avekim b'Adonai Elohechem chayim kulchem hayom.
Baruch Adonai Hamorach. Baruch Adonai Hamorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
We're beginning again at the top of page 696. Okay, so you're going to be right there. Lotasu Abel. Okay, 1, 2, go.
Amen. Ta'asu Avel Bamishpat Lo Tisa Fene Dal Lo Tadar Fene Gadol Betzedek Tishpot Amitecha Lo Hilech Rahil Be'amecha Lo Amod Aldam Re'echa Ani Adonai Lo Tisna Et Ahiha Bilvavecha Hoheach Tohiach Et Amitecha Velo Tisa Allah Avkeit Lo Tito Lo Titor Et B'nei Amecha Via Haftarah Tulecha Mocha Ani Adonai.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher natan lanu Torah Emet v'chayei olam natan b'tocheinu. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen. Our second reading has us in the middle of 697 with verse number 19. Ya'amdu, David ben Tzvi Eliezer. V'simcha bat Chana v'Eliyahu Sheni.
Baruch Hu Adonai Cham Barach. Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen. chukotai tishmoru behem tchalo tarbia kilayim sadchalo tizra kilayim uveged kilayim shatnez lo yale alecha veish ki yishkaved isha shivat zera vehi shivcha necherefet leish v'havdei lo niftata ochu b'shalom nitan la bikoret tiyeh lo yimtu ki lo chupasha v'hevir hashamo Adonai el petach el moed el asham v'chiper alav hakohen ve'el hasham lifnei Adonai al chatato asher chata v'nislach lo mechatato asher chata.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Our third reading has us on verse number 23, right in the middle of 698. Ya'amod. Ya'amod Yaakov ben Yitzchak Shlishi. Okay, take your towels. Yeah, touch your towels first. And then do that. Not sorry.
Baruch et Adonai Hamorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Vehi tavohu el haaretz untatem kol eitz machal arlatem arlato et pirio shalosh shanim yeh lachem arelim lo yeachel uvashana harvit yeh kol pirio kodesh hilulim ladonai uvashana hahamishit Tochlu et pirio lehosif lachem tevuato ani Adonai Elohechem lo tochlu al hadam lo tenhachashu velo tonenu lo takifu pa'at roshchem velo tashit et pa'at zekanecha veseret la nefesh lo titnu bifsarhem uftovet ka'akav lo titnu bahem ani Adonai Al tahalel et bidcha lehaznota velo tizne haaretz uma haaretz zima et shabtotai tishmaru umikdashi tirau ani Adonai al tifnu el haavot ve'al hayidonim al tavakshu letama bahem ani Adonai Elohechem mipnei seva takum ve'hadarta pnei zakein v'reita me'olecha ani Adonai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yaakov Rivi'i. We continue with the fourth reading, the top portion of page 700, verse 33. Okay, so you are right there.
Baruch et Adonai Hamorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
V'chi yagur otcha ger be'artzechem lo tonu oto kezrak mikem Adonai lachem hagar etchem ve'haftalo kamocha ki gerim hitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. Ani Adonai Elohechem lo ta'asu avel Bamishpat, Bamida, Bamishkol, Uvam Surah. Mosne, Tzedek Avnei Tzedek, Ephod Tzedek, Vechin Tzedek, Yelachem, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher Chotzeti Etchem, Me'eretz Mitzrayim, Va'asitem Otam, Ani, did I? I'm sorry, thank you. I'm sorry, Me'eretz Mitzrayim, Ushmartem et kol chukotai v'et kol mishpatai, va'asitem otam, Ani Adonai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah temet, v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
We now enter chapter 20 at the top of page 701. Our fifth reading. Ya'amod. Ya'amod Chamishi. We're on page 701 as we enter chapter 20. Go ahead.
Baruch atah Adonai.
No, up here.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch. Continue.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach L'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar lanu mikol. Amin v'natan lanu et Torah tu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Very good. Amen. Vayidaber Adonai al Moshe lemor, v'al b'nei Yisrael, tomar ish ish, mibnei Yisrael, min hager b'Yisrael, asher yitein mizaro lamolech, mot yumat, am haaretz yirgemuhu ba'aven, v'ani aten epanai ba'ishahu, v'hichrati oto mikerev amoho, Ki mizaro natan la molech leman tamnei et mikdashi uchalel et shem kodshi v'yim halem yalimu am haaretz et einehem min ha'ishahu v'tito mizaro la molech levilti hamitoto v'samti ani epanai ba'ishahu Uva mishpachto v'chratioto v'kol azonim acharav liznot acharei hamolech mikerev amam v'hanefesh asher tifne el ha'ovot v'el hayidonim liznot achareihem v'natati epanai b'nefesh ahi v'chratioto mikerev amo v'hi kadishtem b'tem kedoshim Ki ani Adonai Elohechem.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'kaye olam nata b'tohenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
We're now at almost the very bottom of page 701, verse number 8 for the sixth reading. Ta'amod. Shishi. Come here, take your towel. Touch your towels right there. Point here. Touch that, kiss the towels, and then the blessing there. Barchuet.
Marhuet Adonai Hambora. Baruch Adonai Hamborach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Ushmartem echukotai, v'asitem otam. Ani Adonai mikadishchem ki ish asher yikalel et aviv et imo mot yumat. Aviv imo kilel damav boho Ve'ish asher yinaf et eshet ish asher yinaf et eshet re'ehu. Motu man hanoef v'hano afet. Ve'ish asher yishkav et eshet aviv ervat aviv gila modim tu shnehem demehem bam. Ve'ish asher yishkav et kalato modim tu shnehem tevel asu demehem bam. Ve'ish asher yishkav et zachar mishkevei isha toeva asu shnehem modim tu demehem bam. Ve'ish asher yikach et isha v'et ima zima hi. Ba'esh yisrofu et hen v'eten lo tiyeh zima b'tochechem. Ve'ish asher yitein shchapto b'behema mot yumat v'et ha-behema taharogu. Ve'isha asher tikrav el kol behema l'riva ota v'haraktad ha'isha v'et ha-behema mot yumatu demehem bam. Ve'ish asher yikach et achoto bat avivo vadimo v'ra'ad ervata v'hi tiret ervato chesed hu v'nichritu l'nei b'nei amam ervat achoto gila v'no yisav. Ve'ish asher yishkav et isha davav gilad ervata et mikora hera v'hi gilta et mikor dameha v'nichritu shnehem mikerev amam. V'ervat achodim cha v'echad avicha lo tigale ki et sheiro heravonam yisau. Ve'ish asher yishkav et dodato ervat dodo gila chetam yisau aririm yamutu. Ve'ish asher yikach et eshet achiv nidahi ervat achiv gila aririm yiyu. Ushmartem et kol chukotai v'et kol mishpatai v'asitem otam. V'lo taki etchem haaretz asher ani mevi etchem shama lashevet ba.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hayei olam nata b'toheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Our seventh reading has us toward the bottom portion of page 703, verse number 20. Ya'amdu Shvi'i. Shlomi Zalman ben David Shvi'i.
Adonai Hambarach. Baruch Adonai Hambarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher baruch banu mikol ha'amin v'tana lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'lo te'elchu b'chukot hagoy asher ani mishaleach mipneichem. Ki et kol ele asu va'akutz bam. Va'omar lachem atem tirshu et admatam va'ani etnena lachem l'reshet ota eretz avad chalav udvash. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher v'dalti etchem min ha'amim. V'hivdaltem bein ha'bhema ha'torah latmeya uvein ha'of ha'tamei latahor. V'lo tishaktu et nafshotechem b'bhema uva'of uv'chol asher tirmos ha'adama asher hivdalti lachem litamei v'item li kedoshim ki kadosh ani Adonai v'avdil etchem min ha'amim liot li v'isho isha ki yeh vahem ov o yidoni mochu matu ba'even yirgemu otam demehem bam.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'toheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We now rise for the half Kaddish. Yit gadal v'yit gada shemei rabba. V'yamad divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchayedecho beit Yisrael. Bagahala, uvizman kariv, v'yemiru, amen.
Yesh me rabba mevorach, le'alam le'olmei almaya, yitbarach.
Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yipar v'yitramam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shemeda kudsha, Li'ehela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damihiran be'alma, v'yemiru, amen.
May be seated. At this time in our service, we'll be doing a special Misha Berach, a special prayer for healing for those in our community. If you'd like to mention a name, please meet me in the center of the sanctuary at this time.
Amen.
Our concluding reading returns us to the second line on page 704, verse 25.
Yamod, Yamod, Yamod. Habachor habar mitzvah, David ben Yaakov maftir hazak.
Take your towels, touch right behaved all 10, touch your towels, touch, kiss, roll. 2 hands, loud and clear.
Baruch Hu es Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Baruch L'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim. V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen.
V'chiv daltem ben ha'chema ha'torah latmea uven ha'o ha'tameh latahor v'lo tishaktu et nafshotehem b'chema uva'ov uv'chol asher tirmos ha'adama asher chivdalti lachem l'tameh ve'item li kadoshim ki kadosh ani Adonai Fa'avdil ahem min ha'amim li'oli ve'ish o isha kiyeh v'chem of o yidoni moti matu ba'even yirgmu otam Timehem Bam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chai olam nata betochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Let us please rise.
Mishe Berak Avotenu Avraham Yitzhak v'Yaakov v'Imatenu Serif Karaka v'Leah Hu Yivarek et David ben Yaakov Sheyagia lemitzvot ve'ala hayom likvot hamakom v'likvot haTorah v'likvot haShabbat HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yishmerechu v'chayechu v'chonen libo liyot shalem im Adonai Elohav le'hakol b'torato l'hagab b'drachav ולשמור מצוותיו, להיות אמיץ למצוא את יהודו, ולהיות בן אדם אוהב ואהוב. ונהו היום ובכל יום לכן ולעשות רחמים בעיניך, ובני קוראיו, ושלח ברכה וצלחה מקום מעשה ידיו. יהי רצון שיזכו הוריו, לגודלו לתורה, לחופה. Umasim tovim v'nomar Amen.
May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless Jacob, who has been called to the Torah upon reaching the age of mitzvot, with reverence for God, the Torah, and the Shabbat. May the Holy One protect and sustain him, helping him to be wholehearted in his faith, to study Torah, and to fulfill the mitzvot, and to walk in God's ways. May he have the strength to find his calling to be a person who is both loving and beloved, and may he find love and compassion today and every day in your eyes and in the eyes of all who see him. May his parents rear him to maturity, guiding Jacob to a love of Torah, to the blessing of chuppah, and to a life of good deeds. And let us say, Amen.
Segment of
Segment of Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov.
Segment of
Segment of
Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, segment of Yehelanu, 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 Uvecho Yisrael, Yehelanu, Yehelanu, Uvecho Yisrael, David Melech Yisrael. Chai, chai, v'kayam, David Melech, Yisrael. Chai, chai, v'kayam, Mazel Tov. We'd like to invite all the children who have not yet had their bar and bat mitzvah to come up and collect the candy on the bima. You're helping. Yeah. With hands like those, you can do whatever you want.
Let us all please remain standing for Agva and Glila for the raising and binding of the Torah scroll. Yamdu machbia ve'agolelet.
Vezot haTorah asher sam Moshe livnei bnei Yisrael havi Adonai
Yad Moshe. Let us please be seated. We're going to continue with the chanting of the Haftarah, which you can follow on page 706 of our Chumashim, page 706.
Where do I go?
This is an unusual Haftarah. We don't read it very often. There's about 4 different possibilities for this Shabbat. So we're reading page 706.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratza b'divrachem chane'emarim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'nbiyecha Halo chivnei chushim altemli b'nei Israel nu Adonai. Halo et Yisrael heleti me'eretz Mitzrayim uvlishti mikavtor raramikir. Hine ene Adonai Elohim b'mamlecha hachate'ah v'yishmati ota me'al pnei ha'adama efes ki lo hashmid et be Yaakov nu Adonai. Ki hine Anochi metzaveh v'chani oti b'chol hagoyim et beit Yisrael kasher Yinoah bach v'bra below yipol tzeror arez b'cherev yamutu kol hateyami ha'umrim lo tagish v'tagdim ba'adenu ha'reah ba'yom chachu akim et sukkah David hanofelet v'gadarti et pertzehen v'charisotav akim uvni ticha kimeolam lema'an yershu et sheri edom v'chogoyim asher nikra shemi alechem nu Adonai osezod hine yamim ba'im nu Adonai v'nigash horesh bakotzer v'oreh anavim v'moshe chazara v'hitifu charim asis v'chokag v'ot titmo gagna v'shavti et shavut ami Yisrael ubanu arim v'shemot v'yashavu v'natu charamim v'shatu et yenam v'asu ganot v'achlu et prihem untatim admatam v'lo yinatshu od me'al admatam asher natati lachem amar Adonai Elohecha Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam tzor kol ha'olamim tzadik b'chol hadorot ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer ve'oseh hamdaber m'kayem shechol devarav emet v'tzedek ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'ne'emanim devarecha v'davar echad midvarecha achor lo yashuv reikam ki el melech ne'eman rachaman atah Baruch atah Adonai ha'el ha'ne'eman b'chol devarav Rachem al Tzion ki hi beit hayenu v'lat luvat nefes toshia b'mchara v'yamenu Baruch atah Adonai mesamech Tzion b'vanecha Samchenu Adonai Eloheinu v'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha uv'malchut beit David meshichecha b'mchara yavo v'gel libenu Al kiso lo yeshev zar v'lin halu odaharim ekevodo ki v'shem koshecha nishbat halo shelo yifbeh nero leolam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai
Shemo.
Magen David
Amen.
Aha Torah v'havodah v'hanvi'im v'yom ha'shabbat hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likisha v'limnuha l'chavod ultifaret aha kol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach umvarhim otach yitbarach shimcha befi kol hai tamid leolam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai
Shemo.
Mekadesh HaShabbat. My eyes hurt from reading so much Hebrew. Shabbat Shalom. Becoming a bar mitzvah is important to me because it allows me to become closer to God. I understand that becoming closer to God is not something that happens when I turn 13. I have to work on it for my whole life. The Talmud teaches us that you become a bar mitzvah when you start maturing and when physical changes start appearing on your body. We wait until we are more mature because we need to sacrifice things in our life in order to be able to observe more mitzvot and to follow what God expects us to do. People always think that God wants us to follow things like keeping kosher and observing Shabbat more than anything else. Those are not the only things we can do to achieve holiness in our lives and become closer to God. For example, my Torah portion, the Shabbat, speaks about how we treat others. We learn how to respect other people and all parts of God's creation, including animals. For my mitzvah project, I chose to raise funds and blankets for Wendy's farm. There is a box for blanket donation that you can write as you enter or leave the temple. Wendy's farm is an animal sanctuary in Overton, Nevada, about an hour north of here. I chose this project because I used to have a pet pig named Bacon. We moved to a new house and we couldn't keep her, so we took her to Wendy's ranch where she now lives. I think it is important to help animals because if we don't help them, they really can't help themselves. Starting off, I'd like to give thanks to all my family members for constantly supporting me and my Hebrew journey. Thank you to my grandmother, aunt, and my cousins who have come across the whole country just to watch me and be here with me. I also greatly appreciate all the family members that couldn't make it here today and decided to watch my bar mitzvah through Zoom. I want to give a special thanks to my father, stepmother, my father and stepmother. They are the ones responsible for all my Hebrew education. They taught me my very first Hebrew songs and how to read Hebrew. They have spent countless hours preparing for this bar mitzvah to make it perfect just for me. I also want to give a very special thanks to my mother, stepfather, and sister, Juliana, for coming to my bar mitzvah. I want to also thank my sisters, Hannah and Emily, for taking time out of studying for their college finals to participate in my bar mitzvah. Even my grandpa has played a huge role. He has always been there to transport me to Hebrew school and anywhere I've needed to go. Thank you for the dedication and showing that you care. Next, I want to thank all the friends I've made along the way. These friends supported me no matter what, helped me in hard times, even stood up for me in situations where I couldn't defend myself. Thank you to all my friends. I especially want to give thanks to everyone who decided to come and watch my bar mitzvah today. I'm extremely glad you are here to share this moment with me and watch me become a Jewish man. But of course, last but not least, I want to give thanks to all my favorite teachers, DJ, Adam, Rabbi Hodson, and Rabbi Goodman. Without them, I would not have been prepared for this bar mitzvah at all. You have truly helped me in my journey, and I just want to say thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. I'd like to call upon Avi and Ned to please come up to the bima to share some words with Jacob.
So Jacob, we're watching you up here, and I can't help but reminisce about the movie that I made you watch, the Keeping Up with the Steins. I'm sure most of the people here are there. And I think of the grandma going, "You're a boy, you're a man, you're a boy, you're a man." And that's kind of what's going on, today. This is where you're in the period of life where you're finding yourself and you're changing and you're growing and trying to figure out who you are. And this is the day that lays that foundation of you making that next step, and especially Jewishly. You have a lot more responsibilities as a Jewish man now than you did as a Jewish boy. Yes, I'm going to make you fast for Yom Kippur and everything. So, but that's what makes me think about that. Go ahead.
I'm very pleased with how you did today. You did fantastic. We're very proud of you. And I don't know, you didn't have a need to be nervous. You did fantastic. I think everybody would say that to you. So, mazel tov.
So the tallis that your father gave you was passed down.
Yeah, this is the one Grandma and Grandpa gave to me in almost 40 years now. We're almost hit the 40-year date. So, I'm very pleased to have given that to you. As you can see, I hardly used it, clearly, because it's in such good condition. But truthfully, I always use it for every holiday, and I'm glad I was able to pass it down to you. It's a big pleasure, and I wish Grandma could have been here to see you. As you see, I wore the flamingos on my tie for her. So
she's here. So in passing L'Dor Vador, and we hope that one day that we see you take that tallis and pass it on to your son at his bar mitzvah, and we'll be sitting there with a proud face again as you make that next step, L'Dor Vador, just like today. And so just as parents going into this next phase of your life, it is important that we give you some parently advice, especially with giving your Torah portion.
Always attack each task with a maximum A effort. and take pride in a job well done. Forgive yourself for your mistakes, but make sure you learn from them so as not to repeat them. Never ignore a phone call from your parents. Always make sure that your last words for your loved ones before you leave the house or you hang up is, "I love you," because you never know what could happen. Never be embarrassed to hug your parents. No matter how old you are, there will come a day when you can't, and you wish you had.
Create and maintain a relationship with Hashem. Embrace and show pride for your faith and your cultures, all of your cultures. Learn about all the different things that make you you. And never, ever be afraid to ask questions. That's how we learn. And then finally, in the words of Cody Johnson's song, Till You Can't, if you have a chance, take it. Take it while you have the chance. And if you have a dream, you chase it, because that dream's not going to chase you back. And if you love someone, you hold them as long and as strong and as close as you can. And how long do we do that? Until you can't. Okay? Jacob, you always ask me for ASL signs. And Jacob loves to ask for ASL signs. And he likes to ask me how to curse or inappropriate signs. And I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to show you the most important signs. One, this is for Mazel Tov. And love you.
May I please ask us to rise? We're going to continue on page 177 with a prayer for our country. Thank you, guys. And let us all join together. Our God.
Our God and God of our ancestors,
with mercy accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessings upon this land, upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials, who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them understand the rules of justice you have decreed, so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. Adonai, God whose spirit is in all creatures, we pray that your spirit be awakened within all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from our hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant love and companionship, peace and friendship among the many peoples and faiths who dwell in our nation. Grant us the knowledge to judge justly, the wisdom to act with compassion, and the understanding and courage to root out poverty from our land. May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth, and may you cause all peoples to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not leap of sword against nation, neither shall dare learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say, Amen. Page 178, a prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu shevashamayim, Sur Israel vegoalo, barech et medinat Israel, reshit tzmichat geulatenu. הגן עליה ועברת חסדך, ופרוס עליה סוכת שלומך. ושלח אורך ואמיתך לראשיה, שריה ויועציה, ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך. חזק את ידי מגני ארץ קודשנו, והנחילם אלוהינו ישועה, בעטרת ניצחון תעטרם. ונתת שלום בארץ, בשמחת עולם ליושביה, ונאמר אמן. And we now pray a prayer for peace responsibly, also on page 178.
May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when the great peace will embrace the whole world.
The nation will not threaten nation, and the human family will not again know war.
For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love.
Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion.
Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture, I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you.
I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravished by war.
Let justice and righteousness flow like a mighty stream. Let God's peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Let us please be seated. We're going to continue with Ashrei, page 181.
Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha, Od Hallelujah Selah.
Ashrei Am Shekach Lo, Ashrei Am Shadonai Elohav.
Tehillah LeDavid, Aramimcha Elohai HaMelech, Va'avarcha Shimcha Leolam Va'ed.
Bechol yom avarchecha, v'la shimcha leolam va'ed.
Gadol Adonai Umkulo Me'od, V'ligdulato Ein Heker.
Dor
Lord
Lord
Shabbat
Shabbat
Maasecha, Ugvotecha yagidu.
Hadar Kavod Hodecha, V'divrei Nefilotecha Asicha.
Ve'zuz Nerotecha Yomeru, Udulatecha Asaprena.
Zecher Rav Tucha Yadbiu, V'tzid Katcha Yeranenu.
Chanun Varachum Adonai, Erech Apam Ugdol Chased.
Tov Adonai La'akol, Rachamav Alkol Ma'asav.
Yoducha Adonai Kol Ma'asecha, V'chasidecha Yevarchucha.
Kevod Malchutecha Yomeru, Uveratcha Yedaberu.
Lehodia Livnei Hadam Gevurotav, Ugvod Hadar Malchuto.
Malchutecha Malchut, Kol Olamim, Umemshaltecha B'chol Dor V'ador.
So make Adonai lechol hanoflim,
Zokef
v'zokef
lechol
lechol
הכפופים.
hakufim.
Einei Kol Elecha Yesaberu, Ve'ata Noten Lachem, Adochlam Beito.
פותח את ידיך ומשביע לכל חי רצון.
Tzadik Adonai B'chol Darachav, V'chasid B'chol Ma'asav.
קרוב אדוני לכל קוראיו, לכל אשר יקראו באמת.
Reitzon Yirayav Yaseh, Ve'ed Shabbatam Yishma, Ve'oshiem.
שומר אדוני את כל אוהביו, ואת כל הרשעים ישמיד.
Tehillah Adonai Edaberapi, Vivarech Kol Basar, Shem Kocho, Leolam Va'ed. Va'anachnu nevarech Yah, Me'ata ve'olam.
Hallelujah. Let us please rise.
Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav Shema levado. Hodo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren lehamo. Tehillah lechol chasidav, livnei Yisrael ham kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Mizmor leDavid, havu l'Adonai b'nelim, havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kevod shemo, ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh. Kol Adonai al hamayim, el hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim. Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover arazim, Vaishaber Adonai et arzei havanon, Vayarkidem kemo egel Lebanon v'Sion kemo ben reimim. Kol Adonai hotzet lavotesh, Kol Adonai yakil midbar, Yakil Adonai midbar kadesh, Kol Adonai echole hayalot, Vayechesof ye'arot, Ubechalo kulo merkavod, Adonai lamabul yashav, Vayeshev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom.
ובנוחה יומא.
כי לך טוב נתתי לכם תורתי אל תעזבו את חיים לי למחזיקים בה בתום המאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה
Please be seated.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So a lot of you know this, but many of you might not. Before I decided to become a rabbi, I was actually a high school teacher back in Texas, which means I got to see the same stuff that I saw from my youth in a completely new perspective as an adult. And I want to talk about something today that I feel like we don't talk about a lot, and that is the first day of school. I saw the first day of school many times as a student, and then I had to handle the first day of school many times as an adult teacher. And looking back at both experiences, I've decided that neither of which were very fun. Maybe this is just how we did it in Texas, but this is how the first day of school usually went. Maybe it was the same for you as well. On the first day of school, you have to wear your best new outfit. It's the one that your mom probably bought from Sears the weekend before. You haven't seen a lot of your friends all summer. You just want to talk to them and hang out. But you can't, because the first day of school is where they sit you down and bring out this little orange booklet that says in big terrifying letters, Student Code of Conduct. Now, I don't care who is reviewing this book with you. You could have the most animated, entertaining person going over this little booklet with the class, and it will still put you to sleep every time. They could have hired Robin Williams to teach us this book. Still would have been a snore fest. So no exaggeration, they sit you down in your new clothes, in your new classroom with your new teacher, and then you go over this tiny book for an hour and a half. The problem with the Student Code of Conduct was that the council that they assembled to create and maintain this document really had no idea what kids were into at the time. And it was also really outdated because the same rules that my parents had to follow from 20 years before were still in that same little book. So on the one hand, you had the very obvious rules that every school has to have: no stealing, no violence, no cheating. But then you had a bunch of stuff from the 70s left over that the 90s kids knew nothing about. I specifically remember that the handbook told us that we could not have pet rocks in class. We had no idea what pet rocks were. So really the lesson for the first day of school that day turned into what kind of interesting stuff people did in the 70s. Also, I feel like they only met up once a year to update the Code of Conduct. And I feel like that by the time they went to update it, all the stuff that was popular that they wanted to ban was no longer popular anymore. We had already moved on to something new that they hated. So one year on the first day, we noticed in the book that they had finally gotten around to banning something called POGs, which was a fancy term for this milk cat game that my older brothers had played the year before. But they had not yet banned Pokemon cards, which were the new summer craze. So the teacher would say, "Put those POGs away." And we'd say, "Well, these are Pokemon cards, and they're not mentioned in the Student Code of Conduct." So one fall, they finally got around to banning the ever-popular skateboard. But the summer before, a company called Razor had introduced a foldable mini scooter, which everyone had. So they got rid of skateboards, which weren't cool anymore, and were totally silent about the thing that everybody had, the Razor scooter. We were riding these everywhere, on the hallways, sidewalks, basketball courts. Coaches and teachers were losing their minds. They'd say, "Get off that darn skateboard." And I sounded like a commercial. I'm like, "Well, Coach, this is actually the new Razor scooter. It's foldable, portable, maneuverable." I think the reason I remember going over the student code of conduct so much that it either felt really obvious or totally outdated. Which brings me to our Parsha for the week, Parshat Kedoshim, which Jacob taught about moments ago, and I also taught to our religious school kids on Monday nights. And when I taught them this Parsha, they had a similar reaction. You see, Parshat Kedoshim is really just a long list of laws. Sometimes it's even referred to as the Torah's holiness code. And it lays out laws that basically any rational society would try to implement to maintain an economy or any normal system of commerce. So, for instance, in our Parsha, we're told not to steal, not to commit fraud or robbery. We're supposed to pay a laborer their correct wages. This makes sense, right? Any functioning economy has to have laws like these. But then, in the same Parsha, the Torah also gives us these seemingly random other laws, like we're not supposed to practice sorcery or consult ghosts. We can't cut the corners of our facial hair. We're not supposed to make our daughter a harlot. Wait, what? By the way, these laws aren't organized or categorized in any specific way. They just alternate from the very obvious to the very odd. It's like somebody took a normal law code and cut it up and then pasted it back together, almost very randomly. So in one part of the Parsha, we're taught not to worship Molech, and then we're told about all of the different family members we're not to engage with sexual relations in. This makes this Parsha very difficult to teach to adults, but almost impossible to teach to kids. It's either obvious, outdated, or just very odd. Now, please don't think that I'm saying the Torah itself is weird or odd. The Torah is beautiful. The Torah is perfect. But take note, when I say Torah, I'm not literally talking about the 5 books of Moses. I'm talking about these books as interpreted by our rabbis and sages throughout history. You see, to make any system of law relevant, to make it functional, to make it living, to make it applicable, you have to have a group of individuals interpreting and commenting on that law or text. Every coherent law code throughout history has this. We as Jews have rabbis. The American law system has the Supreme Court. Now, I'm not saying that we're always happy with the outcomes of these interpretations of our laws, civil or religious, but to maintain function, we have to have a group of people who make these interpretations nonetheless. So when I say Torah, I mean oral, rabbinic Torah, as well as the written one. Now, for most of us Jews who have grown up with this, interacted with this, it seems very normal for me to say this idea, but to people of other faiths, sometimes they view this as totally blasphemous. They say, how can you interpret a holy text? Well, just as the United States Constitution has a clause that allows for a judicial body to interpret it, aka the Supreme Court, like I mentioned, the Torah has a clause in Deuteronomy that says, if there is a case too baffling for you to decide, speak to the judges in your time, in your day. Now, this idea can be controversial, not just for people of other faiths, but also for other Jews. You see, I still have many Orthodox colleagues and other colleagues in general who think that the buck stops here with regard to Jewish law. I was once on an APAC trip, and we were all on a bus, rabbinical students from different movements, from different seminaries. We had Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform, all on one bus. And the Reform students all seemed to sit in the front. The Orthodox students all seemed to sit in the back. And I kid you not, the conservative ones, we were right in the middle of the bus. And I started talking to some of my Orthodox friends and colleagues. We started debating about what we agreed over and what we disagreed over. And I remember there was this one guy, and he kept saying, well, Rabbi Soloveitchik says this. And I'd say something else, and he'd say, well, Rabbi Soloveitchik says that. And then he would say, oh, well, Rabbi Soloveitchik, he disagreed with that. And Rabbi Soloveitchik, he hated that. And finally, I said, respectfully, there's just one problem with Rabbi Soloveitchik. And when I said that, everybody looked up immediately. That got their attention really quick. How could anything Rabbi Soloveitchik, their dearly departed but very pious teacher, anything he said, how could that ever be problematic? And I said, the problem with Rabbi Soloveitchik is that he is dead. Rabbi Soloveitchik cannot make decisions about modern Jewish law because rabbis do not paskin halakha from the grave. Note, my friends, that the Torah tells us to speak to the judges in our day, meaning judges who are alive when we are. Now, please note, this does not mean that departed sages and rabbis are irrelevant. Of course not. We seek their opinion out all of the time. But their ideas are not always applicable now because they are not dealing with the same hardships, the same ideas, the same problems that we as living Jews are struggling with day in and day out. Likewise, Parshat Kedushim might not feel like it's always applicable. I mean, when is the last time you heard about somebody worshiping or sacrificing their children to Molech? Thank goodness that doesn't happen in 2022. But what if I told you that when applied to a modern context, these words that we read this morning can and do change the world? What if I told you that an American rabbi, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, he wrote that when he read the words from this parsha, this is from chapter 19, verse 32, when he read these words that say, when a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not wrong him. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your own citizens. You shall love him as you love yourself, for you were once strangers in the land of Egypt. Heschel says when he read those words, he was immediately inspired to walk arm in arm with Dr. Martin Luther King during the civil rights movement. You shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. You see, perhaps the literal Torah couldn't have the capacity to describe the oppression that African Americans faced in the rural South during the 60s. But our Torahs demand that we be a holy people, forced Rabbi Heschel to apply its teachings to a modern-day problem, a modern-day Shanda. Dear friends, if we don't treat our Torah like a living, breathing document, then it can and will achieve the same status as the student code of conduct. Boring, outdated, God forbid, irrelevant. It's up to us to make this sacred text important. Otherwise, it's no better than a pet rock. By the way, I still don't really know what a pet rock is. Tell me about it at Kiddush. Shabbat Shalom.
We're going to continue now with Musaf. The Hatzik Kaddish for Musaf is on page 184. Let us please rise. And Jacob's going to lead us in Musaf, page 184.
Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah be'alma divra'kiote v'yamlik malchute b'chayachon u'yechon u'chai dechol be'Yisrael ba'lala u'izman kari v'meru amen.
Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach le'alam le'ol me'almaya yitbarach.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata chush bechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'meru amen.
Amen. We continue with the Musaf Amidah for Shabbat, beginning on page 185.
Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor V'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Hasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, Vezoher Hasdei Avot, Umevi Goel Livnei V'Nechem, V'Me'an Shemo Ve'achava, U'Elech Ozer, U'Foket U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, U'Foket Sarah, Atah Gibor, Le'lam Adonai, Mechaye Metzimata, Rav Lehoshia, Mechakel Hayim Behesed, Mechaye Meitim Berachamim Rabim, So Noflim Berofei Holim, Umatir Asurim, Kaye Elunato Lishene Afar, Mincha Mocha Bahurut, Umido Mechlach, Melech Memit, Umehaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'emanata, L'chachayot Meitim, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechaye Chameitim. Naritecha v'nardishecha Kisot Siach Sarfei Kodesh Hamakdishim Shimcha Bakodesh Kakatu Aya Neviecha V'kara Ze'el Ze Ve'amar Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzivaot Meloch haaretz kevodo. Kevodo malim olam. Misharta sholim zeh lazeh. Aye mimkom kevodo. Leu matam baruch yomeru. Leu matam baruch yomeru. Baruch kavod Adonai mim komo. Mim komo hu yifem berachamim v'yahod am ham yahadim shemo erev avoker bechol yom tamid hamayim be'achava shema omrim shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Malkeinu hu Moshienu, Vehu Yashmienu, Verahamav, Shenit Leene Kohai, 9999999999999999999. Leot lachem lelohim, ani Adonai Elohechem, udivrei kochecha katuv lemor, yimloch Adonai leolam Elohai Sion, ledor vador, hallelujah. Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador nagid golecha, bonetzah, netzachim, kerushar ha-nakdish, sheshichacha Eloheinu, mepino lo yamush leolam va'ed, ki al melech gadol, v'kadosh ata, ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador nagid golecha, bonetzah, netzachim, Yehushar ha-nakdish, Baruch atah Adonai ha'el ha'kadosh.
If you finish praying the Amidah, please be seated. We're going to continue with Kaddish Shalem, page 203.
Yikadav Yikadav Shemei Rabbah. Velma Divra Kyote V'amlich Mahute V'chai Chon Uvyamei Chon Uvachai Dechol Beit Yisrael
Bagala Ubizman Kariv
Bimeru.
Amen. Yesh Meirav Amevorach Le'allam Uleolmei Almaya.
Barach Vishtabach Vitpa'ar Vinran Vitnase Vitadar Vitale Vitala Shemeda Kudisha Barihu Leila Minko Berchata Pashirata Chushbecha Mechatata Damiran Be'alma Bimiru.
Amen.
Tit Gabal Salotechon Uvotechon Yo Israel Kodama Vuchon Divi Shemaya Bimeru.
Amen.
Yehi Shlama Rabba Mishemaya V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Bimru. Amen. Osei Shalom Bimromav.
Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'imru Ve'imru. Amen. Ein Keloheinu, page 204.
En Keloheinu, En Kadonenu, En Kemalkeinu, En Kemoshienu, Mi Keloheinu, Mi Kadonenu, Mi kemokenu, min kemoshienu, no de Eloheinu,
No del Adonenu, no del Malkeinu, no del Moshienu.
Baruch Eloheinu,
Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch
Moshienu.
Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Sheitiru,
Avotenu,
Lefanecha, Et Ketore Hasamim. At this time, I'd like to call upon Janet Sam, a member of our board of directors, for presentations to Jacob.
Jacob, as always, you've done a wonderful job. It's not surprising seeing you here often during Shabbat and in the hallways getting your lessons. It's nice to see the fruition of all your hard work. And on behalf of the Board of Directors, I would like to present you with your certificate of Bar Mitzvah, which you've really earned. But on top of which, there's some other gifts that I have the pleasure of presenting to you. The first is a Tanakh from Women's League, and you can use that as you continue to study Torah. And there's a Kiddush cup from the Men's Club. So Mazel Tov, and we look forward to seeing you here more in the future.
Thank you. And on behalf of USY, I'd like to call upon Eli Mann, who's the president of our USY chapter, for a special presentation to Jacob.
Jacob, you did a wonderful job, and on behalf of USY, we present you with this Haftarah candle, in which we hope you can light every Saturday night at the end of Shabbat and think about coming to USY.
Now it's me. I'm going to say a couple of words to you. I hope that everything I'm going to say to you right now, you remember. I don't know. Will you remember? Okay. Well, there's a video on Facebook. You can always watch it. No, but look, first of all, we're tremendously proud of you for many reasons. Seeing you here every Shabbat with your grandfather was actually a tremendous inspiration for us. Understanding that you know how the generations work, like Abby said, Ledor Vador, is something tremendously important. So I want to share with you two ideas this morning. The first one comes from the talit that you're wearing, which belonged to your grandfather. And you know, today we read from the Torah something really important. Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. You will be holy, for I, your God, am holy. So in Judaism, we believe that people are holy, that God is holy. We do not believe that objects are holy. That's a very different idea than other religions have. Right? If you go to a church, especially a Catholic church, you will see holy objects all over the place, right? And if you go to, the Muslims have Mecca, and they have a stone that they worship. All different religions have different places they consider holy. We, for example, we have the Western Wall, but it's not the wall that is holy. It's the space in which it is standing that represents holiness to us. So the talit, it's not that it's holy or that it's special because so many generations of your family have worn it. It is you who's going to make it special. So it was special when your grandfather wore it, when your father wore it. But now, if you don't make it special, it becomes a piece of cloth. So it's up to you. And hopefully, you put your heart into it. And you observe the mitzvot with such fervor that those commandments that God gave you really turn you into a holy person. Now, how do we turn into holy people? Well, we as Jews have a very peculiar belief. We do so by imitating God. Just like God clothed the naked, we clothe the naked. Just like God visited the sick, when Abraham had his Brit Milah, we visit the sick. And by the way, your mitzvah project, caring for animals, is a tremendously important path to holiness. There's a concept in Judaism that's called Tsar Balei Chaim, the suffering of all living things. And Jacob, caring for those who cannot care for themselves, like you explained, is super important. Which brings me into the second point here. This week, we celebrated 74 years of the establishment of the State of Israel. And I hope that that idea makes you extremely proud. I know that for many of us, 74 years sounds like a huge number because we're younger. But it's not that big of a number. And if you think about it, my father was born when there was no state of Israel. Right? So this is already something that's unreal because we were given this gift and we, in turn, are in charge now to turn it into a holy place. Right? So how do we do that? And these are the words that I really want you to remember. Throughout your life, you're going to encounter people who are going to tell you many different things about being Jewish. They're going to challenge you. They're going to love you. For some reason, it just never goes unnoticed. There are people going to say to you that we have no right to the land of Israel. And I want you to remember that we absolutely have a right to that land. Not only because God gave it to us, but also because we have actually used our own blood to make that land fertile. Which doesn't mean that we have to die for it, but it means that we have to fight for it. And it also means that when somebody comes up to you and says, you can't, you Jews, you're using your power to oppress others. Nothing could be further from the truth. The fact that we were victims ourselves at some point in our history should make us understand that to become holy, we cannot oppress others. And that in being powerful and having our own land and self-determination and aspiring to holiness, there's a special responsibility, Jacob. And that responsibility is never to become victims again. You understand what I'm saying? Today, in the 21st century as Jews, we are in control of our destiny. And my generation and your generation and generations that will come next have the responsibility to making sure that we remain holy by never becoming victims. There is no holiness in martyrdom. There is no holiness in victimhood. Remember those words. Holiness comes from elevating others with the power that God has given us. Holiness comes from understanding others and their pleas with the insight that God has given us. And holiness comes, just like you said it, from caring for all of God's creation on this earth. From the tiniest molecule, to a rhinoceros and an elephant, to a human being, to plants, to everything that God gave us. We are in charge, and we are in command, and we cannot make them the victims either. Just to close, there's a beautiful zoo in Tel Aviv, the Ramat Gan Zoological Park, which is actually like a place where you first go in with your car and you're driving among the elephants and the ostriches. It's actually very cool. And then you get to the zoo itself, and there's something that happens in that zoo that doesn't happen any other place in the world. Every animal has a name. So by the cages, right, they have a lemur. And it says, this lemur, his name is Itzik. And then you go to the elephants, and there's an elephant, and it says, this elephant, her name is Chaya. And then you go see that there was a big peacock, right? Chaim. So all of these animals have names. And my son Josh is going to be working there this summer, and I asked him, why do these people give names to the animals? I've never seen that ever in the world, anywhere. And the answer is, because if each animal has a name, then you understand that every animal has a purpose, and every animal has a soul. So thank you for your mitzvah project, and for caring for those who are lowlier and lonelier than we are. And Jacob, always stand tall and proud for your people. That is the first step to become holy. May I please ask us to rise. May God guard you and keep you. May God cause his light to shine upon your face all the days of your life. May he take you up on his wings and show you his peace now and always. Amen. Mazel tov, Jacob, to you and to your family. May this be the beginning of many, many smachot, of many, many joyous occasions in your life as a proud Jew. Let us now remain standing for Aleinu, page 205.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol
לתת גדולה לתפארת.
שלא עשנו כגאי הרצון, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כחל, וגורלנו ככל המונה, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שיוצא שמיים ויוצר הארץ,
ומשה יקראו שמיים.
קראתי בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
ונאמר
והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ.
ביום ההוא
ביום ההוא
יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
ושמו אחד.
Let us please be seated. Mourners and those who are serving yard side remain standing for the mourners Kaddish, page 207.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
ועלמד דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחייכון ובימיכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקדושה בריחו. לעילה מן כה ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו
Amen. I'd like to call upon Janet Sama, member of our board of directors, for the announcements.
Shabbat Shalom. Mazel Tov to Jacob and his whole family on this wonderful simcha. Thank you to Rabbi Goodman, Rabbi Hodson, DJ, and Jacob for leading us in services this morning. Please join us Sunday at 9 and Monday through Friday at 7:30 in the morning for morning minyan. On Friday, May 20th, Friday Night Kids returns with a Shabbat service geared towards our young families. There will be a dinner, a Friday night's kids service, followed by a craft. On Sunday, May 22nd, Women's League will have our donor luncheon honoring Madeline Karchmer, Cheryl Ross, and Kim Maymar. The luncheon begins at 1 o'clock. In the evening of Tuesday, May 31st, there will be a screening of the Clarion Project's documentary, Kids Chasing Paradise. This is a powerful documentary that follows the stories of activists working to save children from extremism. Luau Shabbat is making waves at TBS. Luau Shabbat starts with our Mishpacha service, then games, and a limbo contest for the children. A delicious community dinner, finishing with Kabbalat Shabbat and the Ruach Ensemble. It will take place on Friday, June 3rd. Through the efforts of the Friends of the Israel Defense Forces, we will be having 2 IDF soldiers with us at our Friday, June 10th, Kabbalat Shabbat service. Please come and listen as they share some stories with us. RSVP to all these events can be found on your weekly TBS email or calling the office. Following services, please join us for Kiddush in the large social hall. Today's Kiddush is sponsored by the Mendel family in honor of Jacob becoming a bar mitzvah. Once again, Mazel Tov to Jacob and your entire family. If you know a temple member who is in the hospital, ill at home, or in a nursing home, please contact the temple office to let us know. Shabbat Shalom.
And just a quick reminder, on the 31st of May, we have that movie, Kids Chasing Paradise. Just an explanation, it's kids that actually get radicalized and become immersed in the world of radical Islam and eventually end up going to the Middle East and fighting for ISIS and stuff like that. It's a tremendously powerful documentary. I've watched it, and I cannot recommend it enough. I think that we all believe that we know how this happens. But when you watch this movie, you are going to be mesmerized by the real reality, which is that there could be a week or 2 weeks between the beginning of the whole indoctrination and these kids ending up in the Middle East holding an MK-47. So please join us. It'll be a very enlightening evening on the 31st. And Richard Green, who's the CEO of the Clarion Project, is going to be speaking after the movie. He's really, really a wonderful person. He's also a rabbi, by the way, which I discovered the last time that I met him. I had no idea. And they do tremendous work in the field of extremism, both with the left and with the right in the United States. So please join us for that. We're going to conclude our service with Adon Olam, which is on page 211, followed by Kiddush. I would like to ask all the children to please come up at this time to the bima for Kiddush and Adon Olam.
Adon Olam, Hashem Malach, B'Terem Ko, Tzini Ding Dong, Eit Nasa, Hefsako, Azay Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, Ve'acharei Kitlot Takol, Levado Yisum Nora Adon Olam, Ve'hu Haya, Ve'hu Hove, Ve'hu Yevetimora Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'Terem Ko,
Yetzir Nivra,
Behefsakol, Azay Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, Vehu Echad, Ve'ein Sheni, Laham Shelo Le'akbira Adon Olam, Beli Reshit, Beli Tachlit, Velo Ha'oz Ve'ha'misra Adon Olam, Adon Olam, Asher Malach, Terem Ko, Tzini Ding Dong, Eit Nasa, Behefsakol, Azay Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, Vehu Eli, V'chai Goali, V'tzor Chavli Be'et Sara Adon Olam, Vehu Nisi, Humanosli, Menat Kosi Be'yom Ekra Adon Olam, Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'Terem Ko, Tzini Ding Dong, Eit Nasa, Hefsakol, Smash Azay Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, Be'ado Avkid Ruchi, Ve'et Ishan Ve'a'ira Adon Olam, Ve'im Ruchi Gevi'atzi, Adonai Ve'lo Ira Adon Olam, Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'Terem Ko, Tzini Ding Dong, Eit Nasa, Hefsakol, Smash Azay Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, V'shamru V'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, L'asod et HaShabbat L'dorotam Barit Olam, Beini u'v'minei Yisrael oti le'olam, Ki sheishet yamim as'aronai d'shamayim v'et ha'aretz u'v'yom ha'shvi'i Shabbat v'yinafash. Al kain barach Adonai yom ha'shabbat v'kadshehu, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Borei pari ha'gafei.
Amen.
Sparkly. Okay, emotzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam,
Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Adonai Yosle Moiten, Adonai Yavarech et Amov Shalom. Shabbat Shalom Mevorach, Mazel Tov to the Mendel family. Mazel Tov to Jacob. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
So, everything good?
Okay. We're gonna have a piece of
Gavin Sullivan, walking around in a